Good morning. You're watching AnewZ. I'm Dilek Tuna. Here are the top stories. For the first time in nearly 6 decades, a Syrian president steps up to speak at the United Nations. A shooting at a Texas immigration facility kills 1 detainee and seriously injures 2 others. And Yemen's Houthis claim responsibility for a drone strike in southern Israel. We start at the United Nations at a landmark occasion as Syria's President Ahmad al-Shara addressed the UN General Assembly, marking the first time any president from his country has done so in almost 60 years. In his speech, al-Shara blasted Israel, saying that it has not yet stopped its threats against his country since the fall of Assad. Negotiations have been underway for a security deal that al-Shara says he hopes will bring about a withdrawal of Israeli forces from Syria. Now, the US Special Envoy for Syria, Tom Barrack, has announced that a de-escalation deal between the two countries is nearly complete.
US Special Envoy for Syria, Tom Barrack, said Syria and Israel are close to reaching a de-escalation agreement. The deal would see Israel halting its attacks on Syria, while Syria would agree not to move machinery or heavy equipment near the Israeli border. Barrack's announcement comes as Syria's interim president Ahmad al-Shara made an appearance at the United Nations 81st General Assembly, making it the first Syrian presidential address in nearly 6 decades. Al-Shara said his country is committed to dialogue and described Israel's attacks as a threat to the region.
Israeli strikes and attacks against my country continue, and Israeli policies contradict the international supporting position for Syria, which threatens new crises and struggles in our region for this purpose. And in face of this aggression, Syria has committed to dialogue, and we're committed to the disengagement of forces agreement of 1974, and we call on the international community to stand beside us in face of these attacks.
Israel's Prime Minister's office confirmed that negotiations were being held with Syria, but stated that the conclusions were contingent upon ensuring Israel's interests, which include the demilitarization of southwestern Syria and safeguarding the well-being and security of the Druze in Syria. Under US pressure, Syria is accelerating talks with Israel for a security pact that Damascus hopes will reverse Israel's recent seizures of its land, but that would fall far short of a full peace treaty.
A gunman who carried out a fatal shooting at an immigration facility in Texas left a bullet engraved with the phrase anti-ICE. The attack happened at an immigration and customs enforcement field office in Texas and left 2 people dead, including the gunman. It's now being investigated as an act of targeted violence.
After the assassination of Charlie Kirk in Arizona, another shooting has struck the country, this time in Texas. On Wednesday, a 29-year-old man opened fire at an immigration and customs enforcement facility in Dallas. The attack left 1 detainee dead and 2 others critically injured. The shooter, identified as Joshua John, died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Authorities said John left behind ammunition marked with the phrase anti-ICE written in blue ink.
We responded to the call, got to the scene, and we later learned that we had 4 individuals that were shot, 2 of them deceased, including the shooter. The DPD was able to locate the shooter, who was deceased. We're going to be working this investigation shoulder to shoulder with our federal partners. The FBI is on scene.
The exact motive for the attack remains under investigation. However, the Republican sides identify it as a radical left attack. President Donald Trump said on social media that he would sign an order to shut down domestic terrorism groups and told Democrats to stop speaking against ICE. Vice President J.D. Vance also weighed in on the incident, strongly condemning the attack.
We know this person was politically motivated. They were politically motivated to go after law enforcement. They were politically motivated to go after people who are enforcing our border. And I think that is the most disgusting thing. The very people who keep us safe ought to be honored and protected and praised by Democrats and Republicans alike. It is time to stop the rhetorical assault on law enforcement. Because here's what happened.
The Dallas Immigration and Customs Enforcement Office that came under gunfire on Wednesday morning will not have migrant check-ins until Monday.
A drone attack by Yemen's Houthi group has injured 20 people in southern Israel. The device struck a busy hotel area, causing damage and panic among tourists, while Israeli interception attempts reportedly failed. This is the latest in a series of Houthi attacks in support of Palestinians.
The drone air force of the Houthi armed forces carried out a significant military operation using 2 drones targeting Israeli enemy targets in the area of al-Rashrash, south of occupied Palestine. The operation successfully achieved its objectives thanks to God, while the interception systems failed to counter it.
NATO is warning Russia to stop with provocations following multiple instances of Allied airspace violations. Meanwhile, European approach to Russia got some criticism from Washington. Our Anita Sharma has the details.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where NATO condemns recent Russian violations of member airspace, most notably 3 MiG-31 jets entering Estonian skies for around 12 minutes before being repelled by Italian F-35s. Russia denies the claim. The alliance calls these actions dangerous, escalatory, and risking miscalculation, and pledges to use military and non-military means to defend its territory under Article 5. These incursions followed a wave of Russian drone attacks across Poland earlier this month, some of which were shot down by NATO jets. NATO's Secretary General Mark Rutte and other leaders emphasized that such violations cannot go unchecked, warning Moscow that provocations must stop. Meanwhile, at the United Nations, U.S. President Donald Trump criticized European strategies toward Russia. He said NATO nations, quote, should shoot down Russian aircraft if they enter their airspace. But he stopped short of committing U.S. forces in each case, saying it depends on the circumstance. Trump also called out Europe's continued energy ties to Russia, migration policies, and what he described as weak leadership. He pushed for a strategic overhaul in European defense posture and insisted that the EU stop funding war against themselves. His remarks underscore growing pressure from D.C. for Europe to get tougher, especially in light of U.S. frustration over Chinese and Indian oil imports from Russia. Now, Europe's response to these provocations remains largely diplomatic, calibrated, and bound by collective decision-making. While NATO warned further violations could provoke direct responses, it is not publicly committed to automatic shoot-downs in every case, leaving room for threat assessment and escalation control. Compare that with Turkey in 2015, shooting down a Russian Sukhoi Su-24 near the Syria border after 17 seconds in Turkish airspace. Turkey claimed it warned the Russian aircraft to change course multiple times before firing when it violated Turkish airspace. The Russian government contested the claim, saying the jet was still in Syrian airspace. But that Turkish action remains one of the most forceful examples of a NATO country immediately enforcing its airspace sovereignty. It sent a clear message to Russia at the time and deepened tensions, but it was the product of clear national rules of engagement and political willingness to act decisively. Europe today is more cautious. It enters incursion responses via alliance structures, joint decisions, and escalation thresholds. While that ensures unity, it also slows reaction time and may dilute deterrence messaging. As NATO sends firmer warnings with the U.S. publicly urging shoot-downs, Russia may test these boundaries further. But Europe's comparative restraint versus Turkey's more immediate enforcement 10 years ago reflects the alliance's strengths in multilateralism and vulnerabilities in unified action. The next violation will be as much of a test of resolve as of diplomacy. For AnewZ, I'm Anita Sharma in the Netherlands.
Now, British authorities have detained a man in his 40s over a series of cyber attacks that affected flights at major European airports. The attacks targeted the service provider for check-in and boarding systems, causing flight delays and cancellations. Officials have called the arrest a positive step, but said the investigation is still in its early stages and remains ongoing. Denmark has shut another airport after drones were spotted in its airspace. Aalborg Airport in the north of the country has been closed after drones were sighted nearby, just 2 days after similar disruptions halted flights at Copenhagen Airport. Authorities say the incidents mark one of the most serious attacks yet on the country's infrastructure, amid wider concerns about suspected Russian drone incursions across Europe. A Spanish military jet with a defence minister on board suffered a GPS disturbance while on the way to Lithuania, according to Spanish officials. The military aircraft was flying near Kaliningrad in Russia on Wednesday morning when the incident is reported to have happened. Earlier, we were joined by Anna Evans, political analyst in Lisbon, Portugal, who said the GPS jamming of Spain's defence minister's plane fits a wider pattern, noting similar incidents with EU leaders visiting NATO's eastern border and describing it as part of Russia's hybrid warfare tactics. Let's see more on that story.
I do see this as a continuation of a pattern because, as we saw in your previous piece on what has happened in very recent past, the President of the European Commission, von der Leyen, has also been on a plane that also got its GPS jammed when flying on a tour on the eastern border of the European Union. And what happened with the Spanish Minister of Defense is that she was flying to Lithuania with families of soldiers that have been involved in defending the eastern boundaries of the European Union and, by the way, of NATO as well. And so President von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, when her plane was recently also jammed in its GPS, she was also visiting the eastern boundaries of the European Union and NATO again. So these are the territories that, from the point of view of the European Union, form a buffer zone, with regard to Russia and its possible territorial claims or potential threats. So yes, there is a pattern that whenever a policy leader of the European Union is visiting the buffer territories of Eastern Europe, which are both buffer for NATO and the European Union, we see this kind of cyber warfare, mixed hybrid warfare that it displays the capacity of Russia to interfere and its audacity to interfere with political leaders that represent NATO countries.
Denmark's Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen formally apologised to Inuit women subjected to involuntary birth control for decades. Frederiksen said the acknowledgement marks an effort to repair strained ties with Greenland.
Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen travelled to Nuuk on Wednesday to deliver an official apology for a decades-long birth control campaign imposed on Greenlandic Inuit women. Calling it a dark chapter in our shared history, Frederiksen stated on a social media post, the apology was an important step toward healing. During the 1960s and 70s, thousands of women, nearly half of those of childbearing age, were forced to wear intrauterine devices without consent. Many were left sterile, while others suffered long-term physical and psychological harm. The scandal remains one of several painful episodes straining Denmark's relationship with its Arctic territory, alongside cases of forced adoptions and child removals. Copenhagen is seeking to repair ties with resource-rich Greenland, which has strategic significance internationally. Alongside the apology, on Monday, Fredriksson announced a reconciliation fund to compensate victims and others who face discrimination for their Inuit heritage.
France awaits the verdict in Nicolas Sarkozy's trial over alleged Libyan campaign financing, a case that has cast a long shadow over the former president's legacy.
A Paris court is set to deliver its verdict on Thursday in the trial of former French President Nicolas Sarkozy. He is accused of accepting illegal campaign financing from late Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi during his 2007 presidential bid. Prosecutors are seeking 7 years in jail, a €300,000 fine, and a 5-year ban on holding public office. Sarkozy, who led France from 2007 to 2012, denies the charges, insisting no Libyan money was ever used in his campaign. The case alleges that he and senior aides agreed in 2005 to a corruption pact with Gaddafi, aimed at funding the election and improving the Libyan leader's international image. 11 former aides are also facing charges, with penalties ranging from suspended sentences to 6 years in prison. Evidence cited by prosecutors includes statements from 7 former Libyan officials, trips by aides to Libya, financial transfers, and notebooks of the late Libyan oil minister Shukri Gunman, who died in 2012. Sarkozy's defense maintains he did not need foreign funds for his campaign. The former president has faced multiple legal battles since leaving office, serving time in previous graft and campaign finance cases and losing France's Legion of Honor. Appeals are ongoing, and even if convicted in this case, he is unlikely to go to prison immediately. Sarkozy remains influential on the French right and continues to meet with President Emmanuel Macron. The verdict from the Paris Criminal Court is scheduled for 10 a.m. on the 25th of September 2025.
President Xi Jinping has set out China's new climate plan, pledging to cut China's emissions by 7 to 10% by 2035. China, responsible for nearly 30% of global emissions, had previously pledged to peak its carbon output, but had never set a specific numerical goal. President Xi added that wind and solar power would expand 6-fold. He stressed these efforts meet Paris climate change goals, but called for international cooperation. China's backing Brazil's $125 billion Tropical Forests Forever Fund, a landmark plan to reward rainforest nations for conservation. The move signals Beijing's shift from climate aid recipient to provider, boosting ties with Brazil ahead of COP30. Maknoor Maktoum has the details in Beijing.
China has endorsed Brazil's ambitious $125 billion Tropical Forest Forever facility, a global fund designed to reward rainforest nations for keeping their forests standing. The move signals a shift in climate finance dynamics, with Beijing presenting itself as a provider of climate support rather than a recipient, placing it closer to advanced economies that have traditionally shouldered environmental funding responsibilities. The fund, spearheaded by Brazil ahead of its hosting of COP30 in November later this year, seeks to mobilize sovereign and private contributions to protect tropical forests across the Amazon, Congo, and Southeast Asia. Brazil has pledged $1 billion as seed capital, while China joins a growing list of supporters that includes France, Germany, Norway, the UK, the UAE, and Singapore. Together, this coalition aims to secure permanent financing to safeguard global biodiversity hotspots. Under the proposed mechanism, the fund's capital would be invested to secure financial assets, with annual returns expected to be around $5 billion, distributed to rainforest nations that can demonstrate they have preserved their forest cover. Payments would be reduced or cut if deforestation occurs, creating a result-based incentive to prioritize conservation. By endorsing Brazil's initiative, China has not only strengthened its ties with Brasilia, but also it elevates its role in the global south, positioning COP30 as a potential turning point for global climate cooperation. AnewZ, AnewZ, Beijing.
On the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York, President Ilham Aliyev has met with world leaders and top global investors. The talks focused on strengthening Azerbaijan's economic ties, attracting foreign investment and promoting regional cooperation.
Amid the bustling diplomatic activity at the UN General Assembly in New York, Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev has been meeting with counterparts and global business leaders to strengthen partnerships and attract investment. On the business front, Aliyev met with Michael Arogeti, CEO of Ares Management, to explore ways to strengthen Azerbaijan's financial markets and attract foreign investment. Potential joint projects in alternative investments, green energy, logistics, and infrastructure were highlighted as key areas for collaboration. Aliyev also met with Kush Choksi, Senior Vice President of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, highlighting Azerbaijan-U.S. strategic partnership and discussing energy, connectivity, and AI to boost business. On the political side, Aliyev met with Portuguese President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa to discuss regional peace in the South Caucasus and agreed to strengthen bilateral cooperation and maintain regular dialogue. Talks with Bulgarian Prime Minister Rosen Gerliazkov focused on expanding energy cooperation and exploring new partnership opportunities, reflecting strong and constructive bilateral relations. President Aliyev also met with Jenny Johnson, CEO of Franklin Templeton, to enhance Azerbaijan's access to global capital markets. Johnson praised the country's investor-friendly environment and opportunities in infrastructure and renewable energy. Finally, Aliyev met with Adebayo Ogunlesi, CEO of Global Infrastructure Partners, to explore collaboration in infrastructure, energy transition, and digital connectivity. The sides highlighted their successful partnership since 2024, including joint investments like Italy's Italo high-speed rail.
Kazakhstan has called for UN Security Council reform so it would include major countries from Asia, Africa and Latin America. In a speech at the UN, Kazakh president also spoke on the urgent need to strengthen the United Nations and urged countries to work together to preserve the Caspian Sea.
Kazakhstan calls for reform of the UN Security Council and its expansion to include major countries from Asia, Africa and Latin America. This was stated by President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev during his speech at the 80th session of the UN General Assembly in New York. In his address, the head of state emphasized that the crisis of trust in multilateral institutions demands urgent and decisive action instead of simple discussion. A comprehensive reform of the UN is a strategic necessity. The president also proposed strengthening the role of middle powers. Amid growing geopolitical tensions, these nations can act as bridges of trust between major players. President Tokayev noted that without concrete steps toward lasting peace and security, the organization will only mitigate the consequences while the root causes of global conflicts continue to multiply. Specific figures were also highlighted. Global military spending in 2024 reached $2.7 trillion. In response to rising international security threats, Kazakhstan expressed readiness to host a new international dialogue on nuclear disarmament and reaffirmed its support for the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. The president also reaffirmed Kazakhstan's commitment to diplomacy over force, expressed concern over the Ukrainian crisis and the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, and stressed the importance of protecting civilians. He also emphasized that territorial disputes in such conditions require responsibility and restraint for the sake of future generations. President Tokayev's political message included a call to reject the language of civilizational clashes. He stated that leadership should be based on respect and dialogue, not suspicion and arrogance. In conclusion, the president emphasized that Kazakhstan will continue to advocate for a path of balance and cooperation.
Kazakhstan will continue to serve as a bridge builder and peacemaker. It will also continue to choose balance over domination, cooperation over confrontation, and peace over war. We stand ready in cooperation with other players, stakeholders in the international community to renew the promise of the United Nations as a beacon of peace, justice, and cooperation.
Notably, the president's schedule in New York was packed with over 20 meetings held with presidents, ministers and heads of international organizations and companies. The discussions covered a wide range of topics from agriculture, education and sports to investments and artificial intelligence. Kazakhstan secured agreements aimed at attracting significant investments. 11 deals and memorandums were signed with major U.S. companies promising investments valued at $5.2 billion in key sectors such as transport, logistics, energy and IT. From Almaty, Kazakhstan, Fariza Kalimurzina, AnewZ.
On the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, Uzbek President Shavkat Mirziyoyev held talks with other world leaders, signed deals with the United States and made efforts to advance Uzbekistan's cooperation with the World Trade Organization and the United States. Our Sevil Rajapova has more.
At the 80th UN General Assembly in New York, President Shavkat Mirziyoyev focused on strengthening Uzbekistan's global partnerships through active diplomacy. During his meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump, the sides outlined priority areas for deepening the strategic partnership, including regional issues and cooperation in aviation, mining, finance, innovation, and energy. A roundtable with American companies also produced 10 agreements in these sectors with Boeing, Citigroup, FL Smith, and Cargill among the signatories. President Mirziyoyev also held meetings with South Korea's President Lee Jae-myung, Albanian President Pejman Begai, King Abdullah II of Jordan, and Czech President Petr Pavel to expand bilateral ties. The talks focused on strengthening strategic partnerships, expanding trade and investment, enhancing technology and industry, developing political and cultural ties, accelerating joint projects and cooperation in innovation, agriculture and transport. At the multilateral level, President held talks with WTO Director General Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, who confirmed that Uzbekistan has completed bilateral negotiations on accession. She noted that the country is expected to become a full WTO member by March 2026. In a meeting with UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, President Mirziyoyev reviewed cooperation within the framework of Uzbekistan's Sustainable Development Goals. The side agreed to prepare a new 5-year cooperation program and to strengthen Uzbekistan's role within UN institutions. They also discussed preparing for the upcoming 43rd UNESCO General Conference in Samarkand, which will further highlight Uzbekistan's growing role as a global platform for dialogue and multilateral cooperation. Through these meetings and agreements, Uzbekistan demonstrated its commitment to multilateralism, regional stability and international cooperation, while reinforcing its position as an active and reliable global partner. It is Sevil Rajapova reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, AnewZ.
Afghanistan is calling on Japan to restart a suspended $34 million water project, first launched back in 2020. The project is seen as vital for addressing the country's growing water needs. For more on this, we go to Kabul and our Tamim Bahis.
Across Kabul, families are increasingly reliant on mobile water tankers as underground reserves dry up. Experts warn this short-term fix may worsen the problem as over-extraction continues to drain aquifers faster than they can recover. The Ministry of Energy and Water has registered more than 200 supply companies, urging them to draw water from rivers or outside the city instead of local wells. Officials say restrictions are also in place for high consumption industries such as factories, and car washes. Meanwhile, Afghan leaders are appealing to Japan to resume a suspended water project worth $24 million first launched in 2020, saying the city urgently needs that infrastructure to secure future supplies. Yet the scale of the crisis is staggering. International agencies report that nearly 1/3 of Afghans lack access to safe drinking water, with studies showing up to 80% of Kabul's groundwater is unsafe. A new report warns the capital could become the first modern city to run dry within 5 years. With aquifers nearing collapse, experts stress the need for immediate investment, stronger regulation and international support before time runs out. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for AnewZ.
Baku's making history as it hosts the ISU Junior Grand Prix of figure skating for the first time, welcoming rising stars from around the globe. With strong international participation and local hopes on the ice, Azerbaijan steps confidently onto the world stage of winter sports. Our Narchicek Jahangirli reports.
2025 ISU Junior Grand Prix of Figure Skating has officially kicked off in Baku for the very first time. 92 athletes from 38 countries are taking to the ice, including 17 pairs. All are between the ages of 13 and 19.
With elegance, athleticism and pressure high, this is junior skating at its most intense. Here competes emerging talents from all over the world. Many are future Olympians.
Over the next few days, the world's most promising young skaters will compete across singles, pairs and ice dance, all fighting for valuable points toward the Junior Grand Prix final in December, the pinnacle of the junior season.
This event is going to be so successful because Ministry of Sports and Youth and the Minister Gaibo have been very, very supportive in preparing for this event. So we are so looking forward to this weekend.
This is the first time the president of the federation has visited Baku. This also means that the city could potentially host many figure skating championships in the future. I hope we will be able to participate in larger competitions in the coming years.
Azerbaijan is represented in the singles category by Sabina Aliyeva, Leyli Ahundova and Irina Kalugina. In ice dance, Anna O'Brien and Drake Tong will carry the flag. A total of 300 participants, including coaches, judges, technical specialists and officials, have arrived in Baku, making a milestone moment for figure skating in the region.
I think that for figure skating worldwide, it's very important to diverse the geography of the figure skating, of the hosting the event, and today we proudly welcome athletes from 38 countries, and I hope that this will give us an opportunity to host many more high-level competitions.
Among the strongest contenders, we're watching standout entries from Japan, the United States, South Korea, and Canada. The competition schedule continues with the men's free skate and the pairs short dance on September 25th. The following day, September 26th, the women will take the ice for their free programs, while the pairs showcase their free dance performances.
And that's the news update from us in Baku this morning. Stay tuned to AnewZ for more.